This is actually the township board agenda. Anything that may go in there, if it's not listed, it's not in there.
Okay.
With the planning commission here being the board that makes the recommendation to the township board, we have legal counsel here bringing to all of our attention consultants under consideration that the township would hire for the planning commission and for the township board regarding the application and procedure for a new gravel quarry. Dan, if you want to.
Okay, we did send a recommendation to the township board in, when was that? In December? Okay, to, hire the, firm of F&V, is that the proper name? Yeah, okay. As a consultant, for general purpose. Yeah, okay, Fries and Vanderbrink. They're not only a consultant, they're also a planning consultant, so. We recommended that to the township board, and I'm not sure what happened at the township board meeting.
One of the board members had a problem with that firm.
Okay,
And at that time, we postponed hiring a consultant so that our legal counsel, Christopher Patterson, and I'll forget your name, I get Lindsay, can address the planning commission and the township board with that process. And they've also provided this breakdown.
right.
So I guess if Christopher wants the floor now, you can address the township planning commission and the board together.
Absolutely. So good evening, everybody. Some of you obviously familiar faces over the last year or two. Some of you are new. So Chris Patterson with Bay Schultz Berzick Roads. We've been doing the township's general counsel work for some time. And particularly just a little bit of background to kind of set the stage for where we're at, because actually by the time the planning commission had taken action in December, we had already sort of had the application been filed with the township and was pending for some time. And we had done quite a bit of work leading up to, I think it was November, when we had kind of first transmitted information about inability to kind of move forward. So there's an actual application for a conditional use permit and a site plan for a, basically it's labeled quarry and mineral extraction. That's a special use permit that you allow in the zoning ordinance. So an individual who wants to conduct that use, obviously within the township, would file that application along with a site plan. And there's two sort of component pieces in addition to the application. One is the application fee, which is paid to the township, and then the addition to that is an escrow fee. And so that escrow fee gets filed with the township, and that provides the ability for the planning commission and the board in the process of sort of reviewing this application and determining its compliance with your zoning ordinance to recoup those sort of costs as a part of that escrow fee. So initially what we did was we worked with the applicant to get the application got filed. We made sure that the application fee and the sort of basic requirements were met. That was all the way back in August, essentially. It stated July. And then what transpired sort of after that was direction from the planning commission at that time to basically move forward. I think it was maybe at an August meeting, I'd have to look at the minutes, but basically directing to say, look, can we find a planning consultant who would assist in the review of the application materials and verifying compliance with the zoning ordinance. And so we were asked to sort of lead the direction on that with our kind of continued relationship with working with lots of different planners in the field. And so we actually started throughout September contacting planners, and one of the big problems, the list that I provided, and I can read them off if you need them, but they're in an email, I think, sitting before most of you, is we basically started going down the list of planners that we have found to be very sophisticated and complex in the review of their projects, contacted them to see if they would have the workload capacity to be able to review the application, drive to the township. We had indicated to them that we would want them to at least be at attendance of the planning commission meetings, assist at the public hearing, at least prepare an individual report on the special use permit application itself and whether it satisfies the standards. And then in addition to that, review the site plan and provide a report as to the compliance of the application site plan requirements with your zoning ordinance. And then in addition to that, since Parma Township has a two-step process, in your zoning review, we had made sure we wanted them to be available to come to the township board as well, after the public hearing and the recommendation stage. And so with the planners that are in the email, we actually started with those companies, and the biggest issue with them was being able to get to it by the end of the year. That was the original problem in August, is we couldn't get someone on that list to be able to commit by year end to be able to process it, or they otherwise, because of sort of workload, weren't interested in either driving or otherwise kind of fitting it in. Two of them told us essentially that if you're unable to find someone, certainly since we work with you guys, we will come back and we'll figure out a way to make it work. So sort of in the process through September of contacting them, we had talked, the applicant had contacted the township maybe once or twice and asked what the progress was, and we had indicated that we currently didn't even have someone to move forward with processing the application. And it was at that time that we told them that it's very unlikely, this was like somewhere maybe late October, early November, that we would be able to even get it processed to start taking it to the planning commission until January. Because whoever we did even contract at that time for the township was gonna need to have time to look at the application materials, study them, look at the underlying property records, the site plan requirements, and the reports that were filed, decide whether there's any additional due diligence or reports that were necessary, and then report that back to the public bodies. So they said, okay, understood. And at that time, we were targeting to see if we could get it in somebody's sort of calendar for sometime in the middle of January. Obviously, given the date today, we're not gonna be able to meet that either, but we went back and eventually Fleiss and Vanderbrink, who we have had experience with in working in other gravel extraction situations, indicated that they would have capacity. So we never did go back to two on the list, which is Spicer and Williams and Works. You know, they indicated that it would have been a workload issue problem, but if we were end up in a bind, like we could go back to them. We ended up giving the F&V contract, and it spelled out in its scope of the contract itself sort of the general requirements we were looking for. We wanted to make sure that there was someone with an experience, wanted them to have a some planning skill, and in addition to that, F&V, which is actually similar with Williams and Works and Spicer, they also have, I mean, they're a larger firm. So in addition to planners, they have engineers at their disposal. They would have other sort of, whether it's soil consulting or other sort of items that might need to be included in a report. They could provide that internally. If they didn't have anybody with expertise, of course, nothing stops the township along the process from saying, look, you know, we gotta send this other piece out for further review to somebody else. So when F&V provided the contract, we basically then at that point sent it on to the planning commission, and that's what kind of started, that was probably done in November, and that's what kind of started the recommendation from the planning commission, and then of course to the board. So I mean, I think the big items for us with what we sort of attempted to do in August is really set the township up with sufficient professionals to kind of review this application when the planning commission is ready to sort of do so. So the current part of the process is getting some contract approved with a consultant that the township so desires to work with. And then we're gonna have to give that consultant time with all of the documents to review those, and I'm assuming that consistent with the scope of review of something like what F&V provided, you're gonna want actual written reports with recommendations on how to proceed at the next step of the process. We did sort of, I think we had talked in, I don't remember, maybe sometime in the middle of December when I had put together the summary of who we had worked with before when the planning commission had made the recommendation. We did reach out to 4 other companies to just sort of, we were running into a real big problem with kind of availability in general. So we did contact Rowe, which is kind of based out of Flint. They're involved in Michigan Township Services. They regularly work with townships on planning matters. They would be able to do it because we've got sort of the whole timeline's pushed now. So we did reach out to see if we could verify. So in addition to the contract you have in front of you, Rowe would also be able to do it in the first quarter of this year. We reached out to two other companies, so Marsh, who I think they sort of indicated they're probably unable to do this type of project, and then Wade Trim and Progressive AE. And ultimately, depending on how you decide to move forward, they need a little bit more information because they need to verify conflicts of interest and provide us an actual scope of engagement, but we can bring that information back as well.
Sorry, Chris. I got the Hops and Marsh, and what was the other company that you listed?
So there's 4 of them. I said Row first, which I think they're available. We basically would have to get back to their contact rep on our timeline and a contract, of course. Wade Trim, Progressive AE, and Marsh.
I haven't seen the contract.
Okay. Thank you.
The contract,
Yes.
where is it?
The contract is it's in email. We sent it in December when we made the recommendation. So it should be attached. I don't have a printed copy with me at the moment, but it's in electronic form sitting in the township's email.
Okay.
I can forward it again, not a problem.
So townships.
We had it in our.
I can even send it to probably somebody right now if you want to print it.
Would you please do that, Christopher?
Yeah.
Yeah, we had no problem. Yeah.
William Edwards?
Lower resource.
See it here. Okay.
I will look forward. I thought it got sent an attachment to.
Is this it?
I thought it went to Bobby and Dan, but.
Yep. Right here.
Okay.
Could we get copies of that made? Please,
How many do you want?
one for each of us, please, Stacia.
Do you need the cover letter too? Cover letter too?
Sure. Thank you, Tammy. Do any of the board members have any questions of Christopher's discussion?
I wanted to know what was the issue with the F and B? What was the,
I don't know what the issue was.
Oh,
I wasn't
okay.
the one that had the issue.
Pro aggregate,
huh?
pro aggregate, pro mining.
How do we know that?
Background. I don't have papers here. I'd like to make a suggestion that we also consider lone wolf resources.
Who?
Lone wolf resources. Contact person is Brian O'Mara.
I'm assuming.
LWR-LLC.com. Is their website.
Christopher, maybe you can help explain to the planning commission and the board the duties of a consultant is working for the planning commission and the township, if I understand correctly.
Yeah, so typically speaking, the reason that you would do it in this type of application is there is certain information when you're trying to assess, like for instance, the general standards of your special use permit. You're looking at standards that would relate to it being harmonious to the community, are there impacts to adjacent uses? With this type of use, you want someone that maybe has expertise or substantive knowledge that they can provide sort of recommendations to you when they're working for you from that basis. So Generally speaking, the value of that is the person can provide those recommendations based on their expertise. The second part of it is that on a project like this, someone has to sit down and sort of review the application, look at the site plan, and verify compliance with your ordinance. But in addition to your ordinance, when you're doing a special use permit, you're always able to sort of impose conditions to verify that there is compliance with special use standards. And so that's where it's helpful to make sure that the individual who's working on the project also has some substantive knowledge in this type of special land use. So that way, because those conditional uses, they're not, those conditions, are not spelled out in your zoning ordinance. They're essentially, there's a general standard, there's an authorization that the planning commission, after you have your public hearing, you're allowed to recommend certain conditions that go on the project if you so decide that it otherwise meets the zoning ordinance. And the board then sort of takes in their final decision, incorporates those. Those conditions are like substantive in knowledge. They might relate to a specific issue with maybe stormwater runoff or equal permitting, dust, odor, mud mats, brine, etc. Things that, some of the things are generally discussed in your ordinance, some of the things are also generally discussed in the application, related to some of the materials they've already provided you. But that individual can break all of that down, put it in sort of a written report that's hopefully, more digestible, much more straightforward, has recommendations in it related to whether certain elements in the ordinance are or are not met. And then, certainly the other benefit of an individual, any of the ones, planner or otherwise, to look at the project, if there are certain parts of the project that they're reviewing, they may have recommendations as to whether there's another consultant or some other professional that they would recommend that you have look at it. Maybe, we've had sand and gravel permits that had issues with respect to wetland delineation, or maybe some other sort of very niche expertise that would indicate you would want to recommend it out. We've had wildlife issues where we've had to send stuff to a biologist that's not sort of within the wheelhouse of a planner, and so I'm not saying that this is the end of the consultants that you might use to review a project, but certainly sort of a land use planner is a good start for where you would look at for satisfying your ordinance standards.
Dan, do you feel comfortable reading part of this cover letter that gives maybe the
Sure.
overview with the Fleece and Vandenbrink?
Okay, the project understanding natural resources management has applied to Parma Township to establish a new extension operation. Accordingly, F&B's role would be to review the application materials and present findings to the township. Scopes of services. Based on the understanding, F&B proposes to perform the following service, confirmed with FSBR and the Parma Township to define the expectations of the project. Submitted application materials along with other materials pertaining to the property and the project. Then there's a budget there which doesn't have a cost with it.
6,000.
Yeah, that's Xed out though, right?
It's highlighted.
No,
I
you're
think.
looking
Just
at
highlighted.
Oh,
my
that's
original.
highlighted.
The stuff
Oh,
that's
okay.
highlighted, that looks like it's
Okay, then the
across.
budget is $6,000 for these services.
It says up here, we have been supporting other townships in their activities regulating such mines for over a decade. We have inspected and reviewed newly established pits as well as reviewed plans to expand existing operations. So they're not new at this, correct?
No. Yeah, letter from Chris, it says they've worked with them extensively in the past. For many years, whatever that is.
Do we know what other townships they've worked for?
Yeah, so, F&B themselves, actually, they are an engineering arm, so they got an engineering component as well as sort of, much like the other ones, working with planners. So they worked with, Waterloo, the specific individual himself also work for Webster Township. We work with F&V on sort of some other municipalities that are unrelated to sort of this planning component for sort of mineral extraction specifically. But we've recently worked with them in Waterloo. We worked with them years ago in Webster Township related to planning and zoning.
With, in regards to mining?
Waterloo, yeah.
And they would be representing us, meaning Parma Township Planning Commission and Board, with relationship to our existing ordinance,
Yes.
recognizing the conditional use aspect of it, bringing to our attention if we had areas that we needed to improve upon or enlarge upon.
Yeah, so the help of the planner or consultant is really kind of multifaceted. It's more than just sort of the substantive part of the application itself, because of course this process includes notice. So you get public notice, you get notice to people that are within a certain distance of the project itself. In addition to sort of notice, they also will assist with sort of, we always end up and sometimes having a lot of application materials, and so sometimes townships wanna make sure the consultant, which I had put somewhere, make sure that the consultant makes sort of materials available to the public, whether that's the sort of the application materials, we can get the site plan online. If there's reports that are done, we can get those online. There's a whole procedural aspect that they're going to assist with as well, because there are requirements under the Zoning Enabling Act that have to be satisfied with respect to the application. That's gonna include sort of locating the parcels, drafting the public notice, and then typically, you know, legal counsel is gonna assist with kind of the legal aspects of that. Once the public hearing process gets done, and whoever you hire, you're gonna have to facilitate kind of what your goal date is that you're shooting for, because we're gonna have to work with them to see what kind of time they need to prepare those additional documents. But once they get the public hearing notice set up, of course, then they're gonna actually prepare a written report explaining to you what their professional opinion is of the application as it relates to your ordinance. And then again, as I indicated, your ordinance itself related to this kind of specific conditional use has general standards in it that would have to be met. It also has some specific standards related to extraction operations. But above and beyond what's even in the ordinance is that there are lots of projects that are reviewed with even, like I said, additional conditions. So related to the specific location of this property, Mr. Pinzia may have specific concerns about drainage, or maybe there's conditions that need to be imposed about other setbacks. Those are all items that they're gonna review in working up the project, whether it's looking at the parcel boundaries, looking at adjacent waterways. Of course, the whole part of this project also includes a public hearing. So when the project is first presented and proposed by the applicant's gonna present that at the public hearing. In response to that, there's gonna be some initial reporting provided by the consultant on behalf of the planning commission, and then of course the board. And during that public hearing, there'll be comments that will be also provided by the public or anybody else that's available. So those can all be taken in by the consultant, the planning committee. Really, they work at the direction of the planning commission. So you have a public hearing, the planning commission says, we want you to take back X, Y, Z and look at these issues, or we want you to research this, or can you sort of report back on that? All of that would come back to a later meeting and be presented to the planning commission. Ultimately, then the consultant and the application gets processed at the direction of you, consistent with sort of what your ordinance requires for at least the minimum legal requirements. The notice, the public hearing, the planning commission here is a recommending body, but then of course final approval going to the board.
So, when we say, I heard the word that they're pro-mining. We are hiring someone that is neither pro nor anti-mining. We're hiring a firm that will represent us to make certain that the procedure is followed correctly and everything is done to our requirements, the county's requirements, the state, how many other levels there are. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah, I think, so I'm not aware of them being a pro-mining engineering firm. That's certainly not why we would have reached out to them. I think that at the end of the day, if they review an application and the application satisfies the zoning ordinance, then the document that they prepare may come back and recommend to the planning commission that they think they should recommend it. If the project that they review comes back and they indicate that they don't think it meets the standards, then they're going to probably do one of two things. They're gonna recommend denial, or they're going to recommend whatever conditions would be necessary to satisfy the requirements of your general use standards. Mr. Pingy is also a professional engineer, so I mean, as a licensed professional engineer, he has additional obligations related to his profession, just like a planner does as far as being a part of various planning organizations. They have ethics and they have fiduciary duties to the client, so I don't think anybody that we've talked to or that's on our list, we would at all represent is one way or the other. They're gonna represent the fiduciary duties of their client. If you sign the contract, they're gonna represent your interests and apply your ordinance as it's written. If the project satisfies that, then they may have a recommendation, that's favorable. If it doesn't satisfy it, then the report's gonna probably detail those items that are deficient.
So who was your first pick out of all those names that you listed?
So
that
I
you-
think,
was
I don't
your
have I think the email that I sent is almost like the order that I was reaching out to people.
Spicer first?
Yeah, so I actually worked with, we worked with Spicer on quite a few projects, and we sort of appreciate how comprehensive they are with their reviews. We had went to Spicer first. I don't know, I mean, at that time, they basically had indicated, they had some pretty substantial projects that were going on in the fall that they were gonna be wrapping up in the early January timeframe. And so they just sort of were concerned about being able to commit to it. But, you know, we do a lot of work with Spicer. They were the first call that I made. The next call that I made was actually to Andy Moore at Williams & Works. And he kind of raised two concerns. One, he said that he would make the time available if it was something that we came back to him on. His only one concern that he wanted to make sure the client was aware of is that, you know, they are located in Grand Rapids. So, I mean, we've had them drive, you know, hour and a half, 2 hours from their office location. I map quested it for him, and he said, you know, look, you're getting kind of in the outer boundaries of where most clients are comfortable, so you would want to check with the client and make sure that's gonna work. You know, Andy and his team, they have several planners at Williams & Works, and they also are sort of full service in that they have engineers, and I've done a project with him before that required even some structural and some concrete engineering, and they had all of that at their place. Those were the first two that I called, and then the next two was, so Gibbles and Webster, which they're actually probably maybe one of the closest, because I think maybe, well, Bruce also actually, I think maybe both of them are coming from Ann Arbor. So, but Gibbles and Webster and F&D were the next two calls that we had made.
The consultant, would they, I take it they would also compare the application to the master plan?
Yes.
Okay.
So when you do a conditional use permit, and when you look at the general standards of the conditional use permit, you're always making sure that it's compatible in general with the master plan. Obviously, the master plan itself, that text doesn't override what's in the zoning ordinance, but it is guidance as to sort of verifying that this is consistent with your future land use goals, which is pretty consistently incorporated through your general conditional use standards. So they're gonna take a look at your master plan, they're gonna look at the specific zoning district where this is being located, and they're gonna figure out, like, are there any general representations or community goals that are in the master plan that are gonna be inconsistent with this type of project? And then do they arise to the level where they're, you know, where they're material, that they would end up in a report that they're gonna be reflected as a basis of either approving or denying?
Okay, thank you.
So our timelines changed then some, where we're not at this? when you
Yeah,
first
correct. The
reached out?
timeline is a moving target, because to be honest, actually, getting a July application and having done nothing since January is sort of abnormal. I wouldn't say typically we've ever done this out of like, it doesn't really generally happen, I guess, is what I'll say. So when we got it in July and it was sent to us, that's when we had started working with Spicer to see if they would be able to find availability, and it was like a moving target. We were kind of talking to everybody with sort of figuring out what they could do in the next 60 to 100 days. So everybody we talked to as the time went on, it moved out. So by the time F&V sort of confirmed, I think maybe that, I want to say that was somewhere around maybe the middle to end of October. So at that time, we figured that they would have 90 days to review through to January. But yeah, that's the one thing. I mean, you could call everybody again, basically, because if you're gonna do it 90 days from today, that availability probably changed, and now you're talking the end of the first quarter. which we're happy to do that, I mean, whatever the direction is from the bodies.
Doug, do you know the availability of the other, person you mentioned?
No, and I haven't contacted them. You know, I thought we'd make a record. If we were to consider them, I thought we would go through legal counsel and have them contact me, like all the others have been contacted.
Tammy, what do you think?
Personally, I think that we originally voted the planning commission to go with, this company, this F&B. I didn't see any issues with F&B. I think that the longer, this is just gonna push this out and prolong the decision even further, without substantial, grounds to say that someone is pro aggregate or not. I don't know how you can say that or not say that. I guess I would, it's kind of vague for me, so, I would need some more information to, I guess, go back on my vote from December.
Happy?
I kind of feel the same way, if our timelines move to see what the harm is and exploring those other companies to see if Spicer was the first pick, I'd rather get our first pick than our last pick. So seeing if they're available or checking out this other place that might have some availability, it can't hurt.
No, I feel that, if the attorneys, are, comfortable with working with any particular consultant, that satisfies me. Doug, you got anything to add to your objection?
Other than when the board has rejected F&B, there was at least three
The
members.
board didn't reject it,
Well,
we
didn't,
postponed
post
it.
Right, but we had 3 votes.
We didn't put it to
Yeah.
vote.
All right, well, word it however you want, it was retracted, because it wasn't done carried.
Okay, well, maybe an error here, but I see no reason why the planning commission should reverse its recommendation to the township board that we, sent to you in December to, pursue, F&V.
I don't think you need a motion.
No, we don't need a motion for that,
You've
yeah, we've already had a motion and we've made a recommendation and, I think,
I feel like we made that recommendation based on they were the only ones available. And we didn't have the other information, so I feel like we kind of were pigeonholed into that.
okay, would you like to make a new recommendation?
Who made the motion before?
My question, I guess, for more conversation and clarification, if we move forward and we get this opinion, we don't have to go with it. If there's something in there that we don't agree with, we can say, no, we don't find it acceptable, and ask for another study, is that correct? If we find the study to be heavy, one-sided, which we're trying to remain neutral through all of it, if you find if the study is heavily slanted one way, we should be able to decipher that from the report.
Good point.
Is
So,
that the case?
so if we go with it.
Yeah, if you want me to comment on that, I completely agree with that. The consultant is hired to assist you in the review process.
Right.
The consultant is not obviously delegated decision-making authority in your zoning ordinance, it's delegated to the appointed planning commissioners with a recommendation. you're the fact-finding body. So when you get the report, you're in the process of finding facts. That's what the point of the public hearing is. You're supposed to seek input from the public, get that comment, align that with the standards. You're gonna have a report from a consultant. You kind of put all that together, but ultimately it's your decision. I mean, were the general standards met and are the specific standards satisfied? If you get a report that you think is missing some component, if you think it's way off base and you don't wanna work with that consultant anymore, then that's a decision that you get to make. If you think that there are pieces that you want to have further developed, then you can do that. We also have planning commissions that get recommendations from professionals that just reject them and say, look, we sort of disagree, we know the community, and we think that these are the two standards that control or whatever. So it's certainly not binding, it's developed to create some substantive documents to help you sort of review the application. But under the statute, the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act, and under your local ordinance, I mean, you are the one who's appointed with the discretion to make that recommendation. So you'll have to be comfortable with how those standards align with the project.
And who pays for the consultant?
Applicant.
So, why wouldn't you then move forward with this, since the planning commission has said to vote that way? And if you want to then have another consultant, there's nothing wrong with having two. That isn't a cost that's beared by the township.
No, at this point, it doesn't really matter because we're starting again. Okay. Would you rather have the number one pick, Spicer?
I personally have not done research on either engineering company
Right.
to determine if one is pro aggregate or not.
I know I don't have the knowledge or experience
That's what we
to
rely on
choose a
our council
consultant.
for.
That's why I relied on legal counsel and asked them to research consultants to assist us, because I don't think any of us are knowledgeable in this process.
Right.
Anybody else?
I know the names,
It's only 77.
but
Yeah, I mean, just commenting on the email, the order that they're listed is the order that I reached out to them. I'm not, we work with Spicer on a lot of projects just because they're located in Lansing, and we're located in Lansing, so we run into them more often. I'm not suggesting, like I said, I know that Bruce has worked on specific sand and gravel projects. Their cover letter is pretty consistent with what I even know of my own personal observations of working with him. So I'm not trying to suggest that one is any better than the other. It's just the order upon which we reached out to them. And we do a lot of work with Spicer because they kind of have the clients that are in the same area as us because of their general location, so.
and when we sign the contract, they're working for us.
Yes.
And when it comes to the board level, I can only speak for myself. If I don't understand it, their report that they provide for me on the board level, if I don't understand it, I'm gonna ask them to clarify it, qualify it. They work for us. We can probably search forever. These are all qualified groups. I didn't seek out to find someone. I don't know if the planning commission sought anyone. I don't know if any of the board members sought anyone. I relied on past practice on our legal counsel to do the research for us. And we ultimately make the decision based on that. Ladies on the board, do you have any comments or concerns? This is a joint meeting.
Okay.
I'm not part of the board, so.
A note was passed from somewhere in the audience, why not two for compare? My big concern was this whole timeline. Whose timeline were we working on? When so many of these independent contractors that you reached out to had a problem with that timeline, then maybe we need to adjust ours. Things happen. I would rather go you went with Spicer first, that, I know you didn't choose them first, but that was the first person you reached out to. I would be interested in reaching out to them because I would rather have who we want, not who we can get for the time. Because we're looking at a very long-term project in our community.
Yeah, I think, so obviously, you know, it's board's direction, not my decision. On the, just on the, speaking to the timeline, I think, you know, the timeline was sort of, in the years of us working with the township, it was more just kind of, it's a pretty custom practice that you typically try to get things rolling in the first 30 or 45 days so we can get public hearing dates set within the next 60 to 90. And applicants who sort of file their application fees are expecting that, you know, they filed this, they're hoping that it gets processed in some sort of consistent kind of timely manner. So the whole sort of timing of it, I don't know that your zoning ordinance speaks to a specific time. If it does, the applicants haven't even told us that you've blown that timeline, so I don't know that I'm worried about it. But, you know, really it's not uncommon to look at starting to process that stuff by the time the planning commission would have a second regular meeting after the application's filed. And we're sort of past that by, you know, a substantial amount of time, 5 months. So it was more just trying to keep it moving. I mean, you've got an application filed, you gotta process it eventually, you gotta get it through to a final decision, so.
I don't have my ordinance in front of me, and I'm not asking anybody to look it up. Are there sanctions that can be imposed against the township for not following our ordinance guidelines after the submission of an application?
So it's actually a pretty tough question. Most of the time applicants, again, this applicant has contacted us maybe once or twice since it's been filed, maybe a few times more than that, just asking us what's going on. And I mean, it's pretty legitimate that in the fall, like we literally just couldn't find the labor to get the hours done to even put it on anybody's agenda. So by the time then we got the contract with F&D, you know, we need sort of authority from the board to sort of engage somebody to bind the township. So that's why all that kind of stalled November, December. I would say that it's pretty difficult to have somebody force an application process on you. Like, you know, you're doing due diligence, you're looking at the consultants to try to figure it out. There's kind of a labor issue, so we were trying to work those problems out. That's all now being made a part of this record this evening. So I'm not so worried about that. I think the real key is that if we were just delaying or acting in bad faith and not processing the application, that's what sort of is going to arise to probably maybe a better substantiated legal case against the township. But at the end of the day, really, you have a zoning ordinance. The special land use is authorized in the zoning ordinance. You have an application process. The person has filed the application. They filed a site plan. So on its face, at least they've met the basic requirements to ask us to do something with it. They filed their application fee. That application fee is all estimated on the basis that we're gonna convene the planning commission, we're gonna hold a public hearing, we're gonna provide the notice. So, you know, we need to get that process started. We need to be moving towards some direction. You don't get to deny a project by not acting upon it. So whether it's gonna be sort of reviewed as a recommendation, the planning commission's gotta take some action at some point. And our recommendation since August has been that we would like you to work with a planning consultant to review this project. So that's kind of the step we're at, is we really need to make that decision. If that decision is that you want us to go contact these two different firms and bring back contracts, you know, we'll go get those and bring those back, or we'll serve at the direction of the board on that.
I'd rather have the planning commission make a decision tonight if that is feasible. Doug, are you prepared to make a decision tonight? Or do you want us to investigate?
I'd like to see what Lone Wolf offers, but, you know. I probably have confidence in Spicer too.
Okay.
So is it fair to say that we could ask, Mr. Patterson's firm to contact Lone Wolf, is that who you said it is? And that could be the second consultant?
Yes. But we wouldn't be able to confirm that tonight. I mean,
We can't confirm
No,
with you
we-
that you would contact them for me?
All we're asking is that we come to an agreement so we can make a recommendation to the township board.
tonight.
Yes.
So we wouldn't have time to contact them, well, is what I'm trying to say.
No,
I
we
think
would
we
We
should
allow,
should make that
No.
we
recommendation.
would allow the.
Oh, okay,
Yeah, township attorney to do that.
all right.
The township
Yeah.
board is asking for direction from the planning commission.
I understand.
If you want more in line with different consultants, so we hear it all at the same time. So with your recommendation to the board, then we can, by our motion, direct legal counsel to support the planning commission. Did I speak
Yep.
so that the board and the planning commission understand?
Alright, so I'm the one who made the motion in December to accept, so I need to make a motion to rescind.
The second.
No, they just didn't, well, that's
We
right, you
didn't
didn't,
act on
yeah,
it.
you didn't act on it, so yeah, that's the first thing we gotta do. Could you do that, please?
Yes,
Well, the person that made the second has to rescind the second.
so I make a motion that we rescind, that I rescind the recommendation that we go with F&E.
Did Tammy rescind her second? or-
I have,
Okay.
Okay. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, now, could I get a new recommendation or a new motion?
would Doug like to make the motion?
Yeah,
I'd like to move that we have, our lawyers contact Lone Wolf Resources and also Spicer on their availability for independent study for the township, for the gravel pit.
okay, you just wanna find out if they're available? Or do you wanna ask for a contract?
Well, their availability, the contract follows.
Well,
Well,
yeah,
we know that Spicer indicated they may not be available,
Right.
but the other company was.
So if they're available, they would give us the contract, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you haven't voted on it, but if you want my input, I think if you vote on this and that's the direction, I think we're just gonna go out and contact both, figure out when could you do this, either one. We'll bring you back an engagement of services from both, and then at that point in time, you've got two vendors before you with two contracts, you can compare them, look at them, decide who you want, hopefully, you'd be able to take a vote. And probably, part of that vote is gonna analyze, they're gonna each hopefully give us estimated timelines as to when they could review the project to get it done, so you can take that into account.
okay,
And I want to just make one comment. One of the things that has slowed us down is, we don't have the frequency of meetings like we had 2 years ago, when they used to have monthly meetings and stuff, so that has slowed down.
Yeah.
And our planning commission meeting was in September, not August. So already we were sitting on it 2 months by the time the planning commission got any information.
yeah, and, well, from this point forward, I can see us having more special meetings. In
No,
order
not a
to,
problem. I'm just
you know,
letting everybody know out here, the frequency of the meetings.
right,
used to be
right, we
monthly,
have quarterly meetings now
they're
where we used
quarterly,
to have monthly.
And that slowed it down, so when their application came in July, it wasn't until September before the planning commission even found out about it.
Okay.
So that right there was 2.5 months
Mhm.
that went by with no action.
Right.
So we need a second.
Yes, we do need a second.
I'll second.
Okay.
That's what it is.
Could you read back the motion?
Motion to contact Lone Wolf and Spicer to get a timeline on their availability and a contract of services.
Okay.
Doug first, I'm second, all in favor?
Well,
Is that what we're
it
doing?
has to be made in a recommendation,
Okay.
and it also has to be, you have to mention the township attorneys in there.
Doug, do you want to say it?
No, you're fine.
Is your recommendation. Doug recommends, made a recommendation that the township attorney contact Lone Wolf and Spicer to get a timeline on their availability and contract for their services. An
That's
estimate of
very
contract.
good. Okay,
And Bobby seconded.
yep. Let's have a roll call vote, if you don't mind. Doug?
Yeah.
Yes.
Tammy?
Yes.
I say yes too. Motion carries. Okay. What's the next thing on the agenda? Okay, this. This one, the change to the zoning ordinance. Section 2.5, solar. And, let's see, all this goes in there, doesn't it? Okay. And it's all contiguous, right? All right. What we need to do is schedule a public hearing for this. Has everybody got one of these?
I did not think that we went through all of that together as a planning commission yet, and discussed what changes we wanted. As we were waiting to get the map.
Yeah,
That's right.
We were waiting to get the map, and we didn't get the map to be able to sit down and as a committee to go through all that.
We gave you the, yes, sir.
I do have an update on the map, so, cause we had a conversation actually with, you and with Bobby related to the maps on the amendment. So our recollection from the last meeting is, sort of backing up, in the summer, we had provided sort of a list of outlines of topics to work on. The planning commission gave direction that, yes, we sort of like those general substantive changes, put it in ordinance format. And in putting it in ordinance format, we had the discussion about creating a overlay district. So in doing that, there's a lot of ways to go about that, but I had recommended that since you're in Jackson County, we reach out to Region 2, because they do provide those services for you, and they typically probably they're pretty, we found them to be pretty efficient. We had worked with Grant Bauman back, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, and we had an amendment a couple other times when we first got started. So we did reach out to Grant too. Grant has actually moved on, so he's not there anymore. When we contacted them, they actually had a new planner, and then like that senior planner had left in a very short term. So they have a new individual who's actually gonna call us back. The short story is, yes, they will create the maps for us. They'll do it with the GIS information, but they're having a little bit of staff turnover, so the right person has to contact us so that we can, what we had asked them for is, can you please give us the contact information for that person? We were gonna link them up with, you guys, and then basically you need to work with them on where you sort of, how we reach the conclusion on where you want the overlay designations. They'll do like a couple different options, so if you think like, look, we'd like to kind of figure out if we look at this section, or if we look specifically along these interconnection lines, they'll take that information and put it together for you. And of course, they have a planning background as well, so they probably have substantive comments that they could even help with. So we don't have the contact information back. That a person was either out of the office or has not yet figured out that this will be their job when they get back, but we sort of have closed the loop on that. We just don't have an actual kind of deliverable to give you yet because of the little bit of staffing turnover there.
Okay, so that will back that up.
Can I get that back for Dan?
Now, do you want to go through this, the text first, and then do the map at a later date? Do you want to schedule something for that?
Dan, this was actually here so it wouldn't be forgotten
Mhm.
and relayed because of
Okay.
everything else that we've had.
Okay,
So that's why it's under old business.
got it.
And I took this from the agenda from the planning commission meeting when I built this.
Okay.
So if there had been action tonight, we would have been prepared to have action on it. So it's actually still in the planning commission's hands,
Okay,
okay?
So my question is, what is this map going to give us if we're trying to make amendments to the ordinance? What is the map going to?
the ordinance text and the ordinance map go hand in hand. The ordinance map is, if you will, another section of the
So
township.
it's not a map of the solar where they wanna put it, it's a
Right.
map, okay.
As opposed, and it will have, you know, the zoning map will have ag and it'll have
I see.
residential and,
I see.
what was the other overlay we have?
We have one
For
for,
the
on North Concord Road.
Yeah.
We have an overlay district there, so we can have in the agricultural district, the industrial and the commercial use all at one legal description.
Yeah, that's what we want. Yeah.
And it's exclusive for that use.
Okay. So, we will hear back from the township attorneys on when the map is ready, and we can do it all at once in one meeting if you like.
I have some additional things that I think we need to look at that I don't think our ordinance covers.
Okay.
After looking at several other township ordinances, there's things that, that they mention that I think would make ours a little bit more substantial.
The stuff from Putnam?
Sherwood Township is the one that had the most recent and most comprehensive. Specifically, it talks, about identifying, wetlands and lakes and any other special areas that might be restricted by, that type of project. The, impact studies, they went to a little bit more comprehensive about doing a post-construction wildlife mortality study. There were, information about storm runoff and otherwise, drainage for protection of the neighboring parcels that ours does not mention, which I don't believe, I didn't realize that it has that big of a drain off on it. If you look at the Jackson County solar projects, there are huge retention ponds that are being made and all of the drainage pipes are pointed outside of their property. So I think that is a real concern, about, you know, that we need to look at for the future. There's also a complaint resolution, system that they have in place where ours, we do have one being added that was part of the one of the changes, but the complaints went to the company, not to the township. So I feel like they should come to the township. It's too easy for people to bury things. And there's a couple other things in here, so I do think we need a specific meeting to sit down and really go through these to make sure, cause I don't wanna have to do this again in, 5 years. I wanna make sure it's as comprehensive as we can make it to protect the people and the property.
Okay, in that case, we should schedule a special meeting. And when the Region 2 is ready, they will contact us for another special meeting for the overlay map. Does that sound all right to everybody? Done? Okay. All right. Let's see. What do we got here now?
This is board stuff.
Okay, the board stuff. So are we done with the planning commission input?
I think
I
so.
don't have anything else.
Do we wanna schedule that meeting?
Yeah, when do you wanna do that? Okay. 2 weeks?
I'm gone the 17th of January through the 23rd.
Okay.
And if we can do it on, not on a Wednesday,
Sure.
that would be good.
Okay.
Not on a Monday or Wednesday. I start coaching basketball next week, so
I
I'll
see.
games on Mondays, Wednesday nights.
What is the best night for you?
Tuesday, Thursday, or Friday.
Okay.
What's the first Tuesday after we get back?
It'll be the 24th.
January 24th?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. January 24th, 6 o'clock.
6 p.m. And we'll need to take care of.
Yeah, I was thinking, is that just for the region two?
No, I don't think so, because we're gonna send it all back to him after, all at once. Is that okay if we just
Yeah.
wait until we,
Yeah, I would say-
map and everything and just send it all to you for review?
Yeah, I would say put all your comments together, and then we can take a look at all your substantive comments, we can put them in the amendment.
Right.
And then, I honestly think by the 24th, you'll already have received an email from us with some status update from Region 2 as to how they'll sort of provide that service to us and what they want.
Okay.
And so I'm thinking that possibly the one thing that you might end up adding to the agenda on the 24th is maybe sort of some bullet point ideas of what you are looking for the boundaries of the overlay. So that then at the end of the 24th meeting, we could get substantive feedback and then also pass on to Region 2 the planning commission's direction on the recommended overlay boundaries.
Okay. Mhm.
What time should we?
6 p.m.
6 o'clock. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else? Doug?
No,
Okay. If there is nothing else, then I call for the adjournment of the Parma Township Planning Commission at this,
Okay, we'll go into the board meeting.
One thing with the planning commission, unless you are sort of just going to temporarily adjourn, you are gonna wanna have public comment. So my one thought is maybe you sort of hold your meeting.
Excuse me.
Until the end of this?
Yeah, right, and then when the township board completes, I would suggest
Then we
that you
can-
sort of would have public comment for both bodies. You can record that in the minutes, and then at the
Rewind.
end of everybody's meeting, you can adjourn.
Rewind. I have, a recommendation from the planning commission. Bobby, if you could read that to me.
You made a recommendation to, contact Lone Wolf and Spicer. The township attorney would contact Lone Wolf and Spicer to get, estimates and a contract for the gravel pit.
Okay. Doug, I think you made that motion, did you?
yeah,
Would you like to, make a motion at board level?
I'd like to move that we, submit, leave alone with them. I give it my notes, so.
Spicer.
Lone Wolf and or Spicer for, independent study for the proposed gravel pit application.
And or? And or?
And or,
No, it's just
Either
and.
one.
either one,
There you go.
You don't care
No,
which
we're-
one we go to?
no,
Not both of them.
not both. He's gonna contact two of them, so.
Well,
That wasn't how I understood the motion.
no,
Oh, I thought it was.
No.
I thought he was gonna
I
contact
thought
the both.
the motion was to contact
Both,
both.
yeah,
For-
both
of
them.
To have
Well,
both
that's
of
what I
them.
said, and,
You said
You're
and
saying
or.
either or.
I said
Would you
and
like
or.
to restate your motion?
I move that we have the township attorney
Quiet.
contact Spicer or Lone Wolf to see their availability and for independent study for the gravel pit application.
I have a motion by Doug to have the township attorney contact Lone Wolf or Spicer. Excuse me, I heard him say, oh, please, be quiet so we can hear. And Spicer,
Yeah,
and Spicer. Sarah's smiling. Regarding consultation work and contract for the pending proposed gravel quarry. Do I have a second?
Yes.
I have a motion by Doug with a second by Sarah. to have our, legal counsel contact Lone Wolf and Spicer regarding, contract availability for work consulting on the gravel quarry. Is there further discussion? If not, Stacia, when you're ready, would you please call the roll?
Doug,
Yeah,
Sarah,
Yes.
Keith,
Yes.
Sheila,
Yes.
Wendy,
Yes, motion carried. Is there any other old business to be brought forward at the township board level? If not, I will go into new business. We have a blight ordinance. Several letters have been sent to 15260 West Michigan Ave. It is a less than desirable property. Working with legal counsel and our law enforcement, our deputy, I move that we turn this over to our township attorney, Eric White, to bring it into compliance. If it is not brought into compliance, that it be cleaned up by the township and placed on their taxes. Do I have a second?
second.
A motion by Wendy, a second by Doug, to go forward with legal on 15260 West Michigan Ave, an action for cleanup. Is there further discussion? If not, Stacia, when you're ready, would you please call the roll?
Wendy,
Yes.
Doug,
Yes,
Sheila,
Yes.
Sarah,
Yes.
Keith,
Yes.
Thank you, motion carried. Is there any other new business to be brought forward at the board level?
We have some cleanup issues. Do we want to address some of that tonight? Do we want to reschedule a special meeting later this month?
Housekeeping issues? We can do that. We can do
Which
that.
thing?
We can schedule a special meeting
Let's
to
do
do,
that.
housekeeping,
Let's do that.
okay? Any other new business? Yes, there is. Keith, please present. Excuse me, shh, we can't hear.
Okay, we, got a estimate from S.T. Walker Concrete Construction about finishing the area of the parking area in front of the fire department building. They already have fixed the major section that was failing and sinking down, and we would like them to, want to approve their continuation, because they know what they have in there and how to correct it. And it will be like a horseshoe around the existing patch. And I lost my notes, and I hope Noel can help me out with transfer of funds.
Up here, Noel. He's our fire board representative.
What you need, Keith? What?
We wanted, figures on the transfer of funds and where we're gonna take them, recommend funds.
Maybe the location of the concrete that will be placed in proximity to the new.
Okay, the new goes right in front of bays 1 and 2. And they wanna extend it down the rest of the way across the bays and then out to the grassy area to the south. And complete that area to
Same
finish
depth?
it out.
Same-
Same company that did the
Okay.
first part, and that's one of the things this is like a continuation of what they did this last fall.
Okay,
They said they would be able to do it this coming year. And, the quote that they sent was, $79,537. That is that is a rough estimate, I would have to say, because it's so early in the year yet, they don't know exactly what's gonna happen farther down the road. But they said that should be a pretty good estimate of what they were gonna have. What the fire board is asking is for the townships to release the $79,700 or $537 from the capital improvement fund to be transferred over when the work is done.
Would you like to make that a motion?
Yes, and
Please do.
make that a motion that we do the transfer and approve the estimate for repair on the concrete.
I have a motion on the floor by Keith to approve $79,537 being transferred from the capital improvement fund at the fire department for the purpose of removing asphalt and replacing it with concrete, 7,575 square feet approximately. Do I have a second to that motion?
I'll second that,
Is that Sarah?
yes.
I have a motion and a second by Sarah to approve $79,537 to be transferred from the capital outlay at the fire department for tear out, remove and replace 7,575 square feet of asphalt to concrete. Is there further discussion? If not, Stacia, when you're ready, would you please call the roll?
Keith,
Yes.
Sarah,
Yes.
Sheila,
Yes.
Doug,
Yes.
Wendy,
Yes, motion carried. Is there any more new business to be brought forward? Christopher, do you have anything to add?
I do not.
If not, if you have any public comments, please state your name. Stand up, state your name for the record. You have 3 minutes to bring it forward.
Start the clock, please. Hi, Dan and Wendy, since this is a joint meeting. On behalf of Parma Preservation Society, I'd like to introduce a couple gentlemen in attendance this evening who each have extensive experience working with townships, like Parma Township, throughout Michigan for, in some cases, several years. So they can introduce themselves and speak to a little bit more detail on what is going on in other townships regarding mining applications or aggregate applications, very similar to ours. The first gentleman I'll introduce is Robert O'Reilly, the law firm of CMP out of Ann Arbor. He can speak to, again, a couple other townships that he's been involved with. He was in the legal team representing the Friends of Grass Lake Township that ended up rendering the opinion from Judge John McBain that you've all been provided. So Robert Riley is retained legal counsel for Parma Preservation Society, and he's with us tonight and will be involved moving forward. Again, extensive experience in applications, and process, and ordinances. And next to Robert's left is Mike Wilczynski, certified professional geologist, several years experience in the aggregate industry in Michigan, and has consulted with several preservation societies and worked with several townships, again, on process ordinances. And I just wanted to introduce these two gentlemen because they are resources for Parma Preservation Society, retained moving forward. And we're willing to assist however may be in the process, professionally, of course, all throughout with both the Planning Commission and the Township Board. Thanks. Hopefully I didn't go over 3 minutes, Wendy.
You're good so far.
I'll keep this short. My name is Robert O'Reilly. I'm an attorney in Ann Arbor with Conlon, McKinney, and Philbrick. I've been involved in a couple of these now. Like I said, I was involved in the Grass Lake matter. And I'm currently involved in Cambridge Township, in Irish Hills, in a similar situation, very similar ordinance to yours. There's a pending application for a gravel pit there. I think you're in good hands with Chris and his firm. I'm confident we'll keep on the right track here and follow the ordinance and do the due diligence that's needed. One recent development that's interesting that may be helpful for you to consider is that last week Cambridge Township held a special meeting as well on their issue of this gravel pit that's proposed to go in there. They actually their board passed a 6-month moratorium on granting any special use permits for mining. They decided they needed more time to look at their ordinance, possibly update it, and they're represented by council in that township as well, and so their attorney blessed that route to go to look at their ordinance. And like I said, it's very similar to yours, just throwing it out there as something to consider, but wanted you to be aware. Look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Hi, I'm Michael Wolchinski, with Pangea Environmental LLC, certified professional geologist emeritus. I started working in the mining industry in the late '70s. And then we're also worked for some oil companies offshore Gulf of Mexico and other places. Transitioned into environmental, and I specialize in hydrogeology and environmental geology. The last place I worked before retiring and starting the company was the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality. I was a senior geologist. I was a regulator for 11 years, where I was interpreting national and REPA, which is the state environmental laws. I retired, and I also retired from teaching. I taught for almost 20 years part-time at several different colleges. I got bored just sitting around, so I started Pangea Environmental, and I do a lot of work for community groups. A lot of it's pro bono. I have a lot of experience, and I just like sharing it. So that's it for me.
Thank you. Anyone else? Please stand up and state your name. Oh, hi, Scott.
Hi, Wendy. I guess my question would be directed more towards Dan and the Planning Commission. The Parma Preservation Society has submitted a petition with over 300 signatures on it, asking you to take a look at our ordinances and the conditional use permit to shore it up to protect the community against some very serious consequences. I just wondered where the Planning Commission was, in working on adding some of those things into, the existing ordinances or the conditional use permit to help protect the community. If there's been any action taken on that yet or not?
No.
Anyone else? What's your name?
Dawn Miller.
Thank you, Dawn.
I was just wondering from the last meeting, have you guys considered the applications for the vacancies that you have?
We have not.
Do you know when that will be considered?
At the conclusion of this project.
Why is that?
Neutrality.
I thought you mentioned, my husband and I, that maybe putting someone from another township on the board would help with that.
No one wants to be part of it.
I do. I never did hear back from you, Wendy. At the last meeting, you said you would get in touch with me about the Planning Commission vacancy, and I sent you several emails.
I have received emails, I have received requests from you and a couple of other individuals, and at this time, I feel that I would like to leave that vacancy open until such time we have individuals that are neither biased for nor against this project.
Is that legal to only have 4 members and not 5 for the
Yes,
Planning
it is.
Commission to make
Yes, it is.
recommendations?
Are there any other questions? Over here.
It's good to hear that gentleman say something about the water. My well is only 60 feet deep. I've got bedrock at 20 feet. The entire well is only 60 feet. I'm higher elevation than where cold site thing. Just south of me is numerous artesian wells. What kind of impact is that gonna have on it? And if it does impact it and it goes through, what kind of remedies would they be to that?
I can't answer it right now.
Good question, Paul. That's something that we will take into consideration. That's why we need consultants. Thank you, Paul. I've got someone over here, Don.
To answer his question, they've been out doing water testing. for the
What's
last
your name?
Thomas Steele, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, Tom.
They've been doing water testing on that property, which I live on Mackey Road. And he's talking about his well that sits there. Right where the woods runs across beside my house, they're testing on a hill. And they hit it last time, it's 16 foot, 5 inches, but they're on bedrock, just like he said. And you hit below the bedrock, the water's gonna go. So, and they're gonna test right now.
Olivia Steele. I would just like clarification from the township because it's my understanding that the law states that there should be a minimum of 5 people on the planning commission.
Yeah, so I think the Planning Enabling Act, which establishes the planning commission, you can decide the number of members you want on it, which you've designated yours as a 5-member. That's actually a maximum, not a minimum. So it's sort of like the board is constituted as 5. The other part of the statute which says that obviously they are appointments, so that appointment process comes through the township board, and so there's a set of qualifications that are in the Planning Enabling Act as to what an individual commissioner would have to represent the community. And so, the statute is interesting in that it does use the mandatory language shall, but of course, that's checked by the legislative process of the board being able to make those appointments. So, the case law out there basically directs, it's much more like a political process. Township board is a legislative function that makes, they're elected, they're the ones who make those appointments to the commission. So it is true, you'll see in the statute, you're obviously constituted as a 5-member commission. When vacancies occur, then the board is in the process of making those appointments. But there's not specific timelines in the statute related to that appointment process, so.
Thank you, Christopher. I've got somebody else in the back, Don. I'll get to you. Your name?
Mike McKinney. I'm also curious about that. If it's been set at 5, then is there only one person on board, the supervisor in this case, that gets to decide that it stays at 4? Or is that a board decision that says, no, we want to fill it with 5?
Looking in the little red book. Let me get it.
So, well, I'll wait for you to get it, but,
this is planning and zoning responsibilities. Members are appointed by the township supervisor, subject to approval by a majority vote of the members of the township board.
yeah.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that, please?
Essentially, in the Planning Act of the Planning Commission, appointments are subject to your chief elected official designated as your supervisor. It's always confirmed by the township board. It actually does depend on the statute, so you're always gonna wanna look at the statute for the body or commission that you're talking about, because the zoning board of appeals actually has a slightly varied process. But, for the planning commission, it'd be in the Michigan Planning Enabling Act. The zoning board of appeals process is then in the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act.
Yes. Dawn.
So, going back to my comment, you had asked Greg, who has no knowledge or education in anything regarding your board. You would rather have someone that really can't contribute compared to someone such as Scott, who's very educated and obviously committed to everything you guys are working on? Don't we want a well-rounded representation of our area?
That's precisely what I'm looking for and why I asked Greg if he would wanna be on the planning commission. He doesn't reside in Parma Township. We can have one member that doesn't reside in Parma Township. He is a farmer. He is a local young man that I felt would be capable of making independent decisions because he does run his own operation, and thought he would be a valuable member. He declined.
So is there anyone in this room that is from Sandstone Township, not Parma Township, that has the abilities that they're looking for? I mean, have you asked other people rather than?
I have asked other people. Any other questions, comments, concerns?
I have a question. Hi, my name is Charles Salidas. Once the gravel pit is established, how deep is it and how long does it stay a hole in the ground, or?
That
once
has
it's-
not been determined. We have not had one meeting regarding decisions on a gravel pit in Parma Township. So no one knows
I was just
what
wondering
will
what the
happen.
long-term consequences of that would be.
We don't know. We don't have a consultant yet.
With steep sides and will be unusable property. You can go to
Excuse me, we're having a board meeting. Excuse me, we're having a board meeting. Could you please, what was your name again?
Charles Salidas.
How do you spell your last name, sir?
Soulides. And we live at 4604 Kids Road.
Thank you. It'd be wise for you to come to planning commission meetings, public hearings, that we have not had a meeting regarding that project.
Okay. I just heard it was a fair question.
I can't answer it, I don't know.
Okay.
That has not been determined. What's your name?
Marie Butler.
Well, thank you, Marie.
And I'm just, as a question, since the planning commission and the board looking for, resources, people to get information and advice, and since this gentleman here especially sounds like he's pretty expertise, what's the chances of the board or the planning commission giving him advice on the gravel pit?
The board, or the planning commission can ask anyone.
Because the Parma Preservation Association? Society, excuse me, has, specifically stated that they are against a, gravel mine in Parma Township. That makes them non-neutral.
I don't think we ever stated that.
I would like to.
Yeah, the first-
Excuse me, we're not having a discussion and an argument. He was asked a question, he's answering it.
Yeah, any consultants
There was an accuracy.
or people involved in that, and that includes all the people who signed the petition, makes them ineligible in a neutral setting. Is that the correct way to say that?
Yeah, I think it's fair, I mean, I don't know what the factual answer is to it, but I think as far as the standard, what you sort of directed in your motion is that you're looking for, township boards of independent study. So I think you are looking, for those two firms that you think have sort of neutrality in looking at the topic.
Fair enough, if I may, Dan?
Sure.
I just wanted to correct one thing that you mentioned there, is that in our website, in our Facebook group, Parma Preservation Society, we're statedly not anti-aggregate. And in all of our, communications to both planning commission and township board, we've been very specific about that. What we are is pro-Parma, and we're pro, protecting our rights, protecting our environment to the fullest extent possible provided to us by the MZEA, which we have not done yet in the, which we don't have in our current mining ordinances. All we're looking for is the fullest protection possible, and we'll go from there.
Okay,
That's all we're looking for.
If that's a fact, I misinterpreted your first mailing to me.
Okay, it's really all over our website, it's all over all of our communications, our Facebook group. So that's what we're here for. Thank you.
Anyone else? Please stand and state your name.
Sylvia Wagner, I'm at 2754 North Parma Road, where all the trucks would be coming right by my house, 294, and my house sits right where the speed limit changes. So I will be hearing jig brakes from the semis. Now I know that there is a semi company that lives further north on North Parma Road, and I hear them every once in a while, but I know it will be a continuous thing to have, and my house sits 75 feet from the road. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Mary Savage, I live on Brown Road. I would like you to introduce the people on the board. This would be the courteous thing to do. We don't know their names.
We have Doug Harris, Keith Mooney, Wendy Chamberlain. This is Planning Commission. Dan Merritt is the chairman, Bobby Norman, Tammy Bates, Sheila Dermarier is our treasurer, Sarah Stanham is our clerk, and Stacia Mathias is our deputy clerk.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, Marshall Farley, I live on Mackey Road. And I heard 4 different consultants referred to, I believe it was. Is there a potential of, requesting proposals from these companies to see what their time frame is, what their rates are, and getting that, officially from them, what we're gonna pay?
That's our intent.
It's our, yes, but have we submitted and asked for 4, about 4?
The direction from the board is 2. I do have, so estimates, I don't have total estimates on the project. You heard the estimate from F&V is 1, that's around 6,000. The 2 that you asked me to reach out to, I don't have numbers on those. But the other 2, the rough sort of hourly rates are for planning somewhere between $115 to $155 per hour, and then any engineering consulting is like $145 to $175.
Okay.
Total estimates on the project I don't have on any of the others, but that's roughly what the numbers are.
And I assume they all got the same scope of work and everything for what we're requesting?
Correct.
For the F&V, is that a solid estimate?
You have to read the bottom, like I don't, if you're saying,
Yes.
you're thinking of a, like max number,
Yeah.
you'd have to read the
Well,
bottom.
I'm in a
That's-
solid, will that increase because it's 2023, or?
Yeah, I don't know, we'll have to follow back, 'cause
Yeah.
I don't know the answer. I actually, honestly, you'd have to read and see, I think it's a good faith estimate, so
Okay.
there's probably room to move, because
Wiggle room.
obviously, the planning commission has extra meetings,
Sure.
all of that's gonna impact the
Sure,
consultant.
that's a baseline.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Please be quiet, we're trying to have a meeting. Any other comments? No other comments? Board meeting is adjourned at 7:33.